Summary of poem Death of a Naturalist by Seamus Heaney. Death of a Naturalist by Seamus Heaney captures the transformation from childhood innocence and wonder to a more mature and complex understanding of the world, highlighting the dual nature of experience with both fascination and fear. In the first stanza, the poem describes a child's joyful exploration of nature. The child is fascinated by the flax dam, where rotting flax creates a rich environment teeming with life. The vivid descriptions of the bubbling water, dragonflies, butterflies, and especially the frog's pond, convey a sense of wonder and curiosity. The child eagerly collects jars of frog's pond, anticipating the transformation of the specks into tadpoles. The involvement of the schoolteacher, Miss Walls, who educates the children about frogs, further enriches the child's sense of wonder and learning. The second stanza marks a dramatic shift in tone and perspective. The child's encounter with the frogs becomes menacing and disturbing. The once fascinating creatures are now perceived as threatening and grotesque. The angry frogs in the bass chorus create a sense of fear, and the detailed description of the frogs as gross-bellied and poised like mud grenades intensifies the feeling of revulsion. The child's reaction of sickness and fear signifies the end of innocent exploration and the beginning of a more mature and complex understanding of nature's darker side. The poem illustrates the inevitable loss of childhood innocence as one encounters the harsher realities of life. The child's initial delight in nature is replaced by fear and revulsion, symbolizing a rite of passage from innocence to experience. Nature is depicted as both beautiful and grotesque, fascinating and frightening. This duality highlights the complexity of the natural world and the varied human responses to it. The transformation of frog's pond into tadpoles mirrors the child's own transformation from an innocent, curious observer to someone who has experienced fear and disillusionment. The poem also touches on the role of education and how learning about the natural world can be both enlightening and, at times, disconcerting. Miss Wall's teachings contrast with the child's later, more visceral experiences with the frogs. Death of a Naturalist is a poignant reflection on the transition from childhood to adulthood, capturing the beauty and complexity of nature while also acknowledging its potential to evoke fear and disillusionment. Through rich imagery and emotional shifts, Heaney conveys the profound impact of these experiences on the human psyche. Structure. Death of a Naturalist is divided into two stanzas of unequal length, reflecting a shift in tone and perspective. First stanza. The first stanza is longer, consisting of 21 lines. It provides a detailed, rich description of the flax dam, a place where the child spends time exploring and observing nature. The language is lush and vivid, conveying a sense of fascination and wonder with the natural world. The child's activities, such as collecting frog's pond and learning about frogs from Miss Walls, are depicted with a sense of innocent delight. Second stanza. The second stanza is shorter, with 12 lines, and introduces a dramatic tonal shift. The idyllic and curious atmosphere of the first stanza gives way to a more menacing and fearful mood. The child's encounter with the aggressive frogs is described in dark, threatening imagery, marking a transition from innocence to a more complex and disillusioned understanding of nature. Form. Free verse. The poem is written in free verse, which means it does not follow a specific rhyme scheme or meter. This allows Heaney to use varied line lengths and enjambment, creating a natural flow and enhancing the vividness of the imagery. The lack of formal constraints also mirrors the fluid and unpredictable nature of the child's experiences. Imagery. Heaney employs rich and detailed imagery throughout the poem. In the first stanza, the imagery is lush and teeming with life, capturing the child's sense of wonder. Descriptions like bubbles gargled delicately and bluebottles wove a strong gauze of sound evoke a sensory experience. In the second stanza, the imagery becomes darker and more grotesque, with descriptions like gross-bellied frogs and poised like mud grenades, reflecting the child's fear and revulsion. Tone and mood. The tone of the first stanza is one of nostalgia and innocent curiosity, while the second stanza shifts to a tone of fear and disgust. This change in tone highlights the thematic contrast between the innocent fascination of childhood and the more complex, sometimes disturbing realities encountered in adulthood. Themes: loss of innocence. The poem explores the theme of lost innocence through the child's changing perception of nature. Initially, the child is fascinated and delighted by the natural world, but this innocence is shattered by the frightening encounter with the frogs in the second stanza. The shift from curiosity to fear symbolizes the transition from childhood to adulthood. Nature's duality. Heaney portrays nature as both beautiful and grotesque, fascinating and frightening. The first stanza highlights nature's wonder and vitality, while the second stanza reveals its darker, more threatening aspects. This duality reflects the complexity of the natural world and human experience. Transformation. The poem mirrors the transformation of frog spawn into tadpoles with the child's own transformation from innocence to experience. The process of growth and change is central to the poem, emphasizing the inevitability of maturation and the accompanying shifts in perception. Education and knowledge. The poem also touches on the role of education and learning. Miss Wall's teachings about frogs add to the child's sense of wonder in the first stanza, but the visceral, frightening experience with the frogs in the second stanza represents a different kind of education, one that comes from direct, sometimes harsh, encounters with reality. Death of a Naturalist by Seamus Heaney is a powerful exploration of childhood, growth, and the complex relationship between humans and the natural world, conveyed through its vivid imagery, contrasting tones, and rich thematic content.
About the poet. Seamus Heaney was born on April 13, 1939, in County Derry, Northern Ireland. He is renowned for his profound contributions to modern literature and is celebrated as one of the greatest poets of the 20th century. Heaney's early life on a farm deeply influenced his poetry, infusing it with rich imagery of rural life and the natural world. His work often explores themes of history, identity, and the human connection to the land. In 1995, Heaney was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature for his works of lyrical beauty and ethical depth. Some of his most acclaimed collections include Death of a Naturalist and The Spirit Level. Beyond poetry, Heaney was also an accomplished translator and essayist. His legacy endures through his distinctive voice and insightful reflections on the human experience, cementing his place as a seminal figure in contemporary literature.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.